Thanks to everybody for being here. I'm really excited for our panel today. Thanks to Meghan Jaquot and Aastha Sahni. They will be doing a talk on breaking barriers, a data-centric approach. They did a research project on cybersecurity professionals around the world and will be bringing the results to present to us here today. We will also have Andy Ellis, who can't be here with us in person, but will be here virtually thanks to the Black Hat team. He's going to speak on reducing your team's energy costs. Andy was the CSO at Akamai, has been in the industry for over 2 decades, and today works for Orca Security and YL Ventures. Before we begin, though, I wanted to talk for a moment about why we are here today. We have a lot of competition for this talk. Thank you all for being here. I recognize you could be in a talk about the latest zero-day vulnerability. Some of you are like, oh God, I gotta go. You could be looking at car hacking. But the fact is that people are the foundation of our cybersecurity programs, right? And right now we don't have enough people. According to IBM's Cost of a Data Breach report, 62% of breached companies reported that they didn't have enough security staff. And that is a contributing factor to these breaches. Last year, Forbes did a whole article on the fact that cybersecurity staffing shortages are making businesses more vulnerable. This is a systemic underlying problem that puts all of us at increased risk. Who's not in the room today? If you look around, you'll see a lot of empty seats. A lot of people are not in the room today. They are not at this conference, and they are not even in this industry. And I guarantee you they would be interested in this topic. 21%, 21.5% of cybersecurity analysts are women. That is less than half of our representation, of course, in the world as a whole. There are so many people that could be in our industry but aren't because of a variety of reasons that we are going to learn about today. Ethnic minorities are also historically underrepresented in cybersecurity, and we need these people. We need the voices and minds of the people who are not in this room, not at this conference, and not at our industry. And we need practical solutions. We also have people who sadly are not on stage today. And they're not on stage for some of the same reasons that block people from being in our industry to begin with. So I wanted to take a moment to dig into that. I'm so happy that Meghan and Aastha could be here. You are brilliant. I'm really excited for your talk. Andy Ellis will be with us, as I mentioned, virtually. And Andy is not here in person really because he is a parent. He is a caregiver. 2 weeks ago, one of his children, who's a teenager, she's a camp counselor. She's a camp counselor for 8-year-olds. And of course, they're just germaholics. She got sick. And Andy canceled a trip to stay home with her and take care of her. And what happens next for people who are caregivers? You get sick too. And so Andy texted me this weekend and said, oh, I think I'm sick. And we talked on the phone, and he said, and it's not even one of those normal illnesses. It's one of the ones you get from elementary school kids, one of the really bad ones. And that's part of why caregivers are not in our industry. Olivia Rose, too, had a sick kid and didn't have time to pre-record like Andy, and her voice will not be heard today. But I look forward to hearing from her at a future conference. I know what it's like to not be in the room because I have spent most of my career also not in the room. For those of you that don't know me, I've been in the industry for 22 years. I started off in 2000 on MIT's network security team. I had the opportunity to write 3 books, and early on I was the co-author for a SANS class, which was great. It was very successful. And I remember one time a track lead, one of the very senior instructors, took me to lunch, and he was like, do you want to be a SANS instructor? And of course I was like, yes, I want to be a SANS instructor. What do I have to do? And he said, well, you can be part of the program and start to teach community classes. I live in Montana, and so that would involve going to different cities. And once I did that, I could start to travel and teach regional classes, and maybe someday I could teach at the nationals. I was 6 months pregnant at the time. And I just thought he was, I think I must have been looking at him like he was a space alien. I didn't say anything, but in my head I was like, where will I put my baby? How am I going to breastfeed? I have to breastfeed every 2 hours for 20 to 45 minutes. Who's going to watch my baby while I'm on the road? It was not a viable career path, and there were no other options to moving forward in that career path. This was in 2010. And so what I did instead was I sent my class into Black Hat to ping Look at the time. She was the contact. And she and the team here evaluated it based on my experience, based on the content. And that year I became an instructor at Black Hat. And I could arrange, I didn't have to jump through all these hoops that involved travel. I could arrange to travel once or twice a year so that I could speak at these conferences. And I've been doing that for 12 years. And I'm so grateful that Black Hat's team is here today. I have never attended Black Hat just as an attendee. And I think there's a lot of other women and other types of caregivers out there who also can't attend Black Hat as an attendee. Because I realized as soon as my daughter was born, I couldn't spend thousands of dollars on childcare and just blip off for 4 or 5 days at a time. I couldn't afford the entrance costs to the conference, like literally couldn't pay the money for the entrance costs and also for childcare. So I started applying to be a speaker and a teacher so I could at least get some revenue in, and that enabled me to attend, and that's why I'm on the stage here today. But I was able to do that because I had already been in the industry for 10 years. There's a lot of people trying to get in the industry who don't have that luxury and have that very real barrier. My experience came full circle in February of 2020. This was at RSA. It was the last conference I went to before COVID. And it was the very last time that I ever saw Alan Paller. How many of you know Alan or knew Alan? He has passed away since then. Alan was the president emeritus of the SANS Institute, and he and I had run into each other a number of times over the years. He was at the speaker party, and I was late to the speaker party. I was late to the speaker party because I wanted to go to the women's networking event, and the women's networking reception was literally at the same time as the speaker party. So you couldn't actually attend the women's networking event and the speaker party. They were at the same time. But I was determined to try. I attended half of the women's networking event and then ran up to the speaker party, and I ran into Alan Paller on his way out. And he grabbed my arm. We were in the elevator. He grabbed it and said, "I want to talk to you." And I was like, okay, cool. And he texted me later. This is what he texted me. He said he wanted to inspire the thousands of young women that we are finding who have a lot of aptitude, but few models or pathways. And that made me so angry. Actually, I was very heartened, and I was really excited to talk to him. But I also just thought immediately, women need more than inspiration. I hear so many times we need more role models for women. We need more mentors for women. We need people to inspire women. It's not about inspiration. I know many, many women and minorities who are inspired enough to be here, but they can't afford it, or they can't tackle things like childcare that have prevented 2 of our speakers and countless potential members of our audience from being here today. So I just wanted to start off with that, and to pay attention to the fact that we have a lot of missing voices. And a lot of these missing voices aren't here because they have caregiving responsibilities, not just parents, but elder care, which often comes up unexpectedly and often hits people, primarily women, later in their careers. People are taking care of spouses. People are taking care of community members. 76.2% of unpaid care work in the world is performed by women. That's why so many of them are not here. And it is also disproportionately shouldered, as you can see in this table, by ethnic minorities. They're missing. This is especially important in our industry because so much of the networking, so much of the training happens in person at conferences like these. Caregivers need to be near the people that depend on them regularly. They need to be available. Andy's going to talk more about that, but often they can't work a solid 9 to 5. They need to pick up kids. They have flexible hours. And they need to have flexibility so that they can step in unexpectedly when someone is sick, like Andy did. And we need our conferences and our networking events and our employers to be responsive to that. And again, I'm so grateful to Jen and Christina and the AV team for allowing and enabling Andy to speak remotely here today. We need conferences to be virtual or at least hybrid. We need to have training opportunities for people that can't travel as easily, and speaking and teaching opportunities so that you can visibly see women and minorities in these leadership roles. We need networking opportunities throughout the year, maybe over Zoom, and I get it. It's not as cool as in person, but it's better than nothing. We need selection processes for instructors and trainers and speakers and authors that are accessible. We need childcare options. I am so grateful. Also, I just found out that Black Hat this year has daycare again. That is amazing. Thank you so much for implementing that. I'm really looking forward to bringing my kids next year. But for those events that can't do it, even just having a list of childcare that's trusted nearby is a big help. So with that, thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you for being here. How many of you feel like you've broken some barriers to be here? I bet a lot, good job. I bet a lot of you today have done this, and every single one of you has your own stories. And for the rest of you, I imagine you're supporting others that are doing the same. So I'm excited to introduce Meghan Jaquot and Aastha Sahni to talk about their research, Breaking Barriers, a Data-Centric Approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherri. So we are going to be talking about how do we actually break some of these barriers. We're going to look at some research that Aastha and I did last year and hope to engage in a discussion with you after the talk. So who am I? I'm Meghan Jaquot. I'm a security engineer at Inspective. We work on bug bounty and pen testing, so obviously this is not those topics. But I'm very passionate about research. I've always been curious and like to figure out how things work, why they work. And so I think that's what led me down this path of trying to think about, when I'm at Black Hat, when I'm at RSA, there's actually no line for women for the restroom. That's actually what started the conversation that Aastha and I were having. We're like, most of the events we go to, there's a line for women at the restroom, and this one there isn't. And so we were kind of wondering, what are some of the barriers that a variety of people, not just women, just a variety of people might find in starting to do research, sending in an abstract, sending in a CFP. So I do a lot of work with people who are nascent in their research. They're just starting it. They're beginning. I'm an academics and research board advisor. I also help out with the SOC at DEF CON. So very involved in this week and do work with Diana Initiative and CFP review boards. So I love getting that involvement in our community. And I've learned and gained so much. And I wanted to bring more people into our community. And so we thought, why don't we start a research study and figure out some of these things that might be barriers for anyone to come, barriers for anyone to start research, barriers for anyone to engage in a conference. Aastha's going to introduce herself, and then we'll dig into our study and what we saw.
Thank you so much, Meghan. So my name is Aastha Sahni. I am a Microsoft technical trainer. And before being a technical trainer, I have been into a diverse background in cybersecurity, from being an IM consultant and then moving into security operations and then technical training. As Meghan was sharing, the major goal was identifying what are the barriers around us that we are still struggling with. Many of us are already into cybersecurity. Many of us are here are planning to get into cybersecurity. But as you are in the industry, what are the struggles that we still go through? What are the areas of opportunities that we can still work with? And what are the areas of struggle that we have not identified yet? And in my journey myself, I identified there were a lot of struggles as I was getting and pivoting into different areas in cyber. I'm also the founder and board chair at BBVIC Foundations, which is Breaking Barriers Women in Cybersecurity. And that's how our talk is termed, like breaking barriers around a data-centric approach. I'm also founder of Cyber Preserve, which is a cybersecurity mentorship program. And I'm also the ambassador for Sneak, which is an application security company. Okay, I'm sorry, I just moved one step back. It just looked forward. Okay, so the data cloud that you're looking right now is actually coming from the survey. It's not a random data cloud that we have just created. Meghan is shortly going to share the statistics of the survey that we have run with. But before I actually start with this data cloud, I want to ask you all, how many of you here are local, coming from Vegas? Can you please raise your hand if you're coming from Vegas, have not traveled from outside Vegas? Ooh, interesting. I don't see any hand up. Okay, how many of you are outside Vegas? All of us, including me. Great. So if you look at this data cloud right here, travel is the term that we have highlighted. Now, when we were running this survey, we actually pivoted on specific areas. Meghan is going to talk about that as well. But when we run the survey, we came up with some of the struggles that the survey takers brought us into picture. And this data cloud is highlighting, if I can put some pin around this. OK, yeah. I don't know how much it looks. Yeah, travel, women, conference, research, public, leadership, visa. This is very interesting. We're going to talk about that. Fewer people into STEM, job. And there's one more thing which is going to be there, which is lateral pivots. So a lot of the challenges that are still prevailing in this industry includes research advancements. Travel is a big challenge, and I'm so happy to see that all of us are traveling outside from Vegas, so this is going to be a very interesting discussion. And along with that, pivots are important within the industry. I know many of us are part of different domains in cyber, but still would want to move ahead in different areas. Along with that, we also talked about like career breaks, talking about lack of mentorship, talking about language barriers, travel barriers, beginning a career barriers, childcare. Sherri has brought a very important point, very important statistics that we will definitely bring into this data-centric approach. So I'm going to head over to Meghan again to bring out some statistics with us.
So like I mentioned, this is a survey we conducted last year. We had over 70 participants, and people self-selected if they felt like they were in an underrepresented group. So myself, I'm a woman in technology. I would consider myself underrepresented because that number is less than 50%. But that can mean a variety of different things. So people got to choose that as part of the survey. And it was a very international survey. Many participants were in the US, but we had a lot of participants in Australia, India, and a variety of other countries. Additionally, we had 3 focus points for the survey. So we had a focus point on, what are just some barriers or some challenges or issues that you see in cybersecurity for you as an individual. We had a section on, have you been to an international conference before? And what are some challenges that you might have received if you were trying to go and do that travel? And then another topic was about, have you ever tried to switch to a different field within cybersecurity? So myself, I started out in threat intelligence. I'm now more on the red team side of things, so I've done a pivot. Aastha's done pivots, many of us have. And so we wanted to understand both, did people want to do that, and were there barriers that they were encountering if they were trying to pivot to a different cyber domain? These are some of the things that people expressed were challenges that they found. So we did both a qualitative and quantitative study, and so this is more on the qualitative side where people could describe out. And so we did a trend analysis, and we could kind of break it into different categories. So people found that just the act of conducting research was quite costly. Maybe they were doing it as a side project, so they would have to take away time from their job. Maybe they would have issues accessing data. So right now, for example, if you are someone trying to do research on various social media platforms, you might find that you're really restricted with looking at the posts that are on X, formerly Twitter. Because now I think it costs like $10,000 a month for nonprofit researchers. Lack of support, both from peers and professors, was another issue that people encountered. So they might have proposed an idea and they might have been shot down. And maybe that they don't see themselves, right? So there is a really big power in visibility and seeing, oh, someone who looks like me is doing this job. Someone who looks like me is doing research. Someone who looks like me is speaking at a conference. And so that is something that people didn't always see. Not feeling confident enough in your abilities. Like, can I actually speak on the Black Hat stage? Can I be here? Do I belong? Additionally, recruitment restrictions. Maybe their current role did not allow for them to go out and do that research and to speak at conferences. I have some friends who work at some places, and there is a whole series of red tape in order to present their research. The time spent could be quite extensive. And then if they're neurodiverse, it might be overwhelming, or a variety of other issues that they might encounter. I'll be passing it back to Aastha now.
Thanks, Meghan. So coming to my favorite area of talk, which is lateral pivots, this is a big, big struggle for many, many reasons. If you look at some of the pointers that we have identified from the survey takers, they said, how can I add new skill to my resume? Let's say somebody's working for identity and access. I want to move into cloud security. I did the certification, let's say CCSK. Now, how can I add it to my resume and at the same time exhibit that I am capable of doing this? Many times you apply for a role, even if you get a call with a recruiter, they're going to say that, oh, you don't have the experience. I'm so sorry. Struggle number 1. Struggle number 2, building experience and demonstrating skills. How after, let's say, we did some training, we did some certifications, how we are going to demonstrate those skills. This is what I said. How can you add it to your resume that, oh, I'm capable of doing this? So what pointers, what can we really add to just make us feel capable that, oh, take me, or maybe someone finding us capable that, oh, I want to talk to you about this role. Another important thing is lack of awareness, guidance, and mentors. Now, this point becomes important because many times when I started to make a conversation with someone at conference, at work, outside work, and I used to talk to them like, hey, I want to pivot into security operations. I started out with identity and access, and they were like, you cannot do this. And this is one of the mentors years back told me, you cannot do this. And I literally got a job. I was about to start. I just called her to maybe gain some motivation. And they said that, oh, no, you cannot do this. And I told her, I have a master's in cyber. I have experience. Why can I do security operations? I'm offered a role. So a lot of demotivation comes when there's lack of awareness, lack of transparency, when even your mentors don't know about these kinds of pivots can take place. Many times I've interviewed people through our community and through my mentorship program where they mentioned that, oh, I was introduced to an opportunity incidentally. And I asked them like, oh, you made some pivots from, let's say, Palo Alto to Apple. How did that happen? How did you move between technologies? And they said that, oh, I happened to meet someone, but there was no definite pattern, or I would say no formula, or I would say no procedure or standard defined, where we can talk to people like, how can we pivot? How we can make those advancements? And at the same time, finding a role with appropriate salary and how to go up with the competition which is happening outside. People will say that, oh, we have a lot of folk in this particular area. Why should we take you? Why you became the most capable one? And at the same time, salary. Then salary became competitive. Then you might have to go for a pay cut. Or maybe you're a senior, and then you're making a pivot, and then you're like a junior. You might have to start fresh. As an instructor, I've trained multiple professionals who started with different domains, and they used to reach out to me on LinkedIn and say that, Aastha, I have 10 years of experience, XYZ domain, I'm still getting a junior role because I don't have the required skills on the resume. I may have the certifications, but I don't have these skills to demonstrate, so very challenging. The next important survey that we run through was travel. Okay, interesting. I know all of us, literally, if I've missed out anyone, I'm so sorry, but all of us pointed out that we are from outside Vegas. Now, outside Vegas can be within the United States, but what about outside United States? How many candidates can make to these conferences from outside United States, or maybe outside a developed country? There are candidates who are within our community, or maybe we know them through LinkedIn. We have mentored them, we have met them. They are struggling to meet to these conferences. They want to come, gain the exposure. Now, what's the challenge? Financial assistance, no awareness around the visa program. How can we apply for those visa programs? If I get here, what about the expensive? Oh, there is a scholarship. I didn't know that. So we have scholarship existing. People don't know. We have opportunities. People don't know. So definitely there is lack of awareness here. If you look at the numbers, participant familiar with international conference, 30% said no. It means they don't know about the visa process at all. They don't know about the scholarship at all. And participation in international conference, look at the number. Out of 76 participants, you can see close to 60 said, we cannot make it. And that's tough. We came up with some possible solutions that we can move towards this problem. And Meghan and I, we worked together to get into like, okay, what can we do? We're talking about problems here. What is the possible solution that we can go with? The very first solution in terms of research was building a research board where we not only can talk about opportunities, areas of growth, but also about our struggles that researchers face and how we can overcome them. Travel and financial awareness. So it's not about creating programs, it's about creating more awareness. Subject matter expert programs so that once you want to pivot, you have the certifications, how to get in touch with those subject matter experts who can help you demonstrate the skills so that you can put it on your resume, and enabling diversity and inclusion with a purpose. Because we are here for a purpose. When we are talking about diversity, when we're talking about inclusion, this is the biggest example that people don't know. We want to include them, but they don't know. So we want to enable more diversity with the purpose. And with some key takeaways, we have Meghan with us.
So we really want this to be more of a conversation, and Sherri will share a way that we can do this at the end. And so these are some questions that I just invite you to sit with and maybe have a conversation with us after, maybe have a conversation in another method that we'll be sharing about very soon. And one of the things that we thought was just so important was we shouldn't just talk about that there is an issue, there is a concern. We should actually talk about some solutions. which we have some links here. And so these slides are available. So you can see it says, can be found here. Well, if you go to the bit.ly/BH23, you can get to our slides and click on that. Or you can go to bit.ly/blackhat23. And so you can get our slides, and we have a lot of resources about how to set up a research board, how to find scholarships, how to do these different things. So it's really important to us that we continue as a community and support everyone. It's like the idea of a rising ship, right? If we're all able to work together, the rising ship in the water, everyone will rise up, and everyone will kind of have increased success. So with that, I will pass it to Sherri, who will introduce Andy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Meghan and Aastha.
Thank you so much.
For bringing us your research. I also really appreciated your practical, concrete solutions. And yeah, definitely take advantage of those resources afterwards. Just wanted to introduce Andy Ellis. Andy is here with us, not just in spirit, but also on the app. If you would like to chat with Andy, you have Andy two ways right now. You have Andy, he's about to be a video. And because he pre-recorded, he can also talk to you as he is talking, which I think is kind of cool. Yay, technology. So check out the app. You can join the live discussion if you would like. And if you have a laptop and you're on your laptop, then you can also get to it from the desktop version. So with that, our AV team, if you could throw up the video, that would be great.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm sorry I'm not joining you in person today at Black Hat, but I figured you didn't want me to infect you all, not with software malware, but with biological malware. So today I'm going to talk about how to reduce your team's energy costs, focusing on inclusion. Now, to put in context, this is a leadership discipline we want to talk about, and leadership only matters in the context of work. Work is when humans take energy and use that to produce value. That's it. And so leadership is just how do we affect this relationship? Now, mostly leadership, we motivate them, we make them unable to do the work, they're ineffective, and there's a misalignment, right? And if you want more on this talk, there's a page that will go into this a lot more deeply. So what we're looking at is the disciplines to counter this: alignment, planning, development, inspiration, inclusion, and wellness. And inclusion is what we're going to talk about, which is part of the category of leadership that I think of as support. How do you support individuals versus how do you manage them or exercise authority? So it's very quick on leadership disciplines. If you want more, again, 6 leadership disciplines talk is at that QR code. So let's look at inclusion. Simplest definition for inclusion is it's reducing the energy cost that people pay to exist in a space. Wellness is about reducing the cost they pay to show up. In my case, it means I'm not, paying the cost of infecting a lot of people on an airplane and there to show up. So we've managed my wellness here a little bit, and all of yours. So the goal here is to look at all the ways that people feel excluded, which is they spend energy that is not productive energy, and we want to help them to spend their energy aligned with the mission and actually achieve some value. So there's 3 core skills I like to look at here. One is for individuals, right? How do you make yourself not feel excluded? Which is, don't always assume that when you have that exclusionary moment that there was ill intent behind it. It might be that somebody was oblivious, and they need to learn to not be so oblivious, but it's very easy for us to spend a lot of energy ranting about a problem that is smaller than what we saw. And it's also a lot harder to convince people to change when, instead of saying, look, what you did was thoughtless, it hurt me, like I know you didn't mean ill, but I'd like you to improve, versus you're an awful person and you need to change this. One of those is going to work a little better than the other. At the organizational level, we think about culture. That organization we operate in is a combination of what we celebrate and what we tolerate. So non-inclusive or exclusive behaviors that are tolerated become our culture and perpetuate this continued cost of exclusion. So what we're going to focus on today is right here, which is how do you get to more micro-inclusions? There's a thing HR will often talk about when you're looking at micro-inclusions or microaggressions, micro-exclusions, and there's a sort of stereotype of the boss who comes in and talks about football, with one person in the team. And everybody hears this conversation, and then the boss goes in, closes their door, gets onto email because now they're running late. And what HR will often tell you is stop having that conversation. One person felt included because there was a micro-inclusion, but everybody else felt excluded because there were no micro-inclusions for them. The solution for this is not to get rid of a micro-inclusion, it's to find other ways. So start to think about, for you, who do you not talk to, not engage with in an organization, and are there ways that you can engage with them? Because that's how you build inclusion, is people feeling connected, that they feel like they know who you are as a human, because they're more likely to forgive small errors when those small errors are a counterpoint to lots of positive experience. When there's no positive experience, then those small errors look like they're born from malice. Now I'm going to do a little review of what I did when I was at Akamai. So I used to be the Chief Security Officer for Akamai, and I want to talk a little about the inclusive effects within that organization. It's a little bit of an eye chart. If you want to see this in full, the QR code here will actually give you the blog post I drew this from. But what I show you is the representation of the last few years when I was at Akamai. You know, I did not start collecting it in my first 16 years in the company, so you only get, the last few years. And so what you're sort of seeing here is this sort of rising percentage of women inside the population. You might see this drop from that first sample to the second one. This was a mid-year sample. I did this in the summer. I was doing it every 6 months at first until I realized that that meant I was counting interns here and not counting interns here. Our summer population was a little bit different. In fact, there's an interesting story about this cadre that shows up over here in a moment that I'll get to. But what you're seeing here is an outcome. And so I'll talk about the practices, but I just want to give you visible outcome. This is possible. And like this is 40%. Just to be very clear, we had an organization, 40% women. And if you look here, you'll actually see that the representation is growing in even senior ranks. This is not just done by hiring and churning junior people. In fact, the last 15 months of this organization, we had 0 turnover. So we were keeping people because they felt included. Now, it might help that 15 months overlapped with COVID. Not a lot of people were changing jobs at the time. So let's look at what we did, right? One thing was we looked at how do we create meeting-free windows. Things like flexible Fridays so that people can decide on the last minute to take a Friday off. For those of you who are single, you might be like, great, I get a 3-day weekend. For those of you who have kids, this lets you say, oh, I'll schedule my appointments with my kids on Fridays and I don't have to worry about juggling meetings with my bosses. I've become a huge advocate, if you're located in one time zone, for not having recurring meetings before 10 a.m. or after 3 p.m. I would love to apply that to myself now. Fortunately, my kids are teenagers, so I don't need to be free then, because I work with a lot of Israelis and West Coasters, and I'm located in Boston. So my meeting-free window is mostly like 10 to 3. We also looked at gradual return to work programs. One of the stupidest things, I think, in American culture today is when people take a parental leave and you expect them to go from not working at all, managing a small child, to showing back up and working a full work week. And instead, what we would do is say, look, you have to come back, you have to touch down for 1 day. It's actually required by US labor law around how disability leaves work. But then we want you to flexibly return in. So maybe you're working half days because that's what's appropriate for you for a while. Maybe you only work 1 or 2 days a week every week until you really understand, like, do you have a nanny? Are you taking care of people? So build programs like this. We're also very focused on instant messaging and having distributed work excellence. Why does this matter? This matters because you don't want to have all the knowledge concentrated in a few people. So you want to make sure that everybody's getting access to information about what's going on in the organization to help develop everyone, which comes into continuous development. Most organizations only invest in developing their best contributors, the top 5%, we give you opportunities, and their worst contributors, the bottom 5%, we put you on a performance improvement plan so that we can fire you. Everybody in an organization should know what their next 2 jobs are so that you can plan ahead, be ready to undertake those jobs, get access to the right skills. Your boss understands what those skills are, so as you get access to knowledge, you can start to learn those. And then, of course, eliminate SPOFs. This is both good for the single point of failure who's the only one who knows something, as well as for everyone else. So if you have somebody, and for us, we had somebody who got engaged, was a single point of failure on a lot of systems. They were our troubleshooter that we would send in. He would build a system, maintain it. Now he's the only one who understands it. He can't really disappear for a month to go on his honeymoon. So instead, we basically scheduled him for vacations on us. free time off, but the first one, he had to be accessible to everybody so that if something broke, he could explain how it worked, get them going. But it gave him the opportunity to write documentation, to train people, to eliminate that single point of failure. Now, what do you get when you do these things? You end up with these flexible work schedules that support more people in your environment. That makes people feel included when they don't have to stress about getting their kid to a doctor or taking time off for their own medical care. You reduce the proximity bias of the people who are closest to the boss, physically and in meetings, are the ones who get the opportunities because you've made sure everybody knows what development opportunities people need, and you've given people access to information. And here's the most important part, the Matthew effect, what's known as the rich get richer, you're going to take advantage of. You're going to make everybody in your organization rich so that the rich do truly get richer, but the rich is everybody in your team, not just that top 5 or 10%. So thank you. I hope you've really enjoyed this panel so far, and I hope you have some great questions. If you want to find me and ask me questions, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'm CSO Andy. Have a fantastic day.
Woo! Thank you, Andy. If we could flip back to the slides for a moment, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, great. This is the beginning of a conversation. Come on up, guys. This is the beginning, and we want to invite you all to continue the conversation afterwards. You can find us all on LinkedIn and on social media, but we've also created a Discord channel as well for those of you that just want to chat about this on a regular basis, come up with practical solutions, and figure out how we can reduce that energy cost, reduce the barriers, and get more inclusion, get more diversity in our industry. So feel free to join our Discord. I believe we have a couple minutes for questions, and then we'll move to the wrap room for some more questions afterwards. So thank you all for being here. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Back when you guys were just getting started in cybersecurity, like when we were all little and all that sort of stuff, what would you have wished you had gotten in terms of things from professors, educators, that sort of thing, that would have helped you to get into the field as opposed to run away screaming? I'm kind of curious for a couple of reasons.
That's a good question. I can start. So that's a very good question. So both my parents were in STEM. So my mom was a nurse practitioner and my father was in CS. But I took CS classes, and it was assumed several times by teachers, oh, do you know coding? Is this your first time here? So I think saying, is this your first time to a woman, it has a connotation like that you couldn't already have experience. So I think trying to balance that, like, do you have any questions? Like, you always want to be helpful versus, if someone already has some experience, if you make that assumption. It happened to me yesterday, actually. Someone was like, oh, is this your first black hat? And I know I look younger, but I've been in industry over a decade. And this is not my first time speaking at Black Hat. So I was like, no, I'm a speaker. I've actually been in the industry for a little bit. So that assumption, I think, is a bit of a microaggression that can come across the wrong way. And it might not be intended that way at all. So I think asking questions in a certain way, it can be really helpful when someone's when someone's in a class.
Yeah, I think I experienced the same thing, actually. And it's hard because it is the case that a lot of diverse attendees are newer, so there's sometimes it's rooted in fact, but I know a lot of the times at conferences I'll be in a circle. There was one time in particular where I remember I was in a circle and I was the only woman in that circle, and everybody introduced themselves and literally skipped over me. And then someone said, oh, are you this person's wife? And that actually happens fairly routinely. So I think making that assumption, assuming that someone has experience, is a better assumption to make, because then if they say, no, this is my first time, that's totally fine. And that come into it with that respect.
I agree as well. Definitely. I've come across instances in my job experience where it was always assumed that I may not know, like especially when I was pivoting. I went through a lot of interviews, and in fact, when I was applying for the very first job, I was really looking forward that if my professors could have guided me better for specific roles that I was targeting, because cyber is very vast, and I think when you're preparing for a specific job role, it's important that you tailor your resume accordingly. So that was the struggle when I was applying for the first job. And in fact, when I was starting with my pivots, again, again, that was a struggle, like talking to recruiters, making them believe in you. So I think those assumptions that if you haven't listed, but you have the necessary skills and given somebody a chance for an interview, I think that's very, very important, because somewhere down the lane, you're going to make it for sure. It's just going to delay your chances of success. So it's just, if you're going to get success at 27, you might take 35. So I just feel that those assumptions and those criteria definitely are big blockers.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
I think that's it. Time.
I think we have time. Oh, nope, we are out of time. So we will move over to the wrap room if anyone wants to join us for discussion there. And again, thank you to everyone for being here.
Thank you.